Hello and welcome to the Making Atlanta podcast. I'm excited for today's episode. My guest is my brother, Bryan Macon. And we get asked a lot if we are twins or not. Bryan is older and taller and faster, which is honestly kind of annoying on at least two of the three of those. But we're doing this podcast because we are fundraising. So we're running the New York Marathon together and we're raising money for Back on My Feet, a nonprofit organization, which we're going to talk about today. So we'll cover all things running, all things Back on My Feet, and this upcoming marathon. So some quick background on Bryan. He works in sales operations at Microsoft by day. Earlier in the day, you can probably find him running in Atlanta. He's been getting up early and training hard for years, which has been inspiring to me. He's fast, like I said. He finished 17th in the Atlanta Marathon in Publix a couple years ago, and then his half marathon in Publix qualified him for this New York Marathon, but we're still fundraising for Back on My Feet and doing that. So without further ado, hope you enjoy the episode. Thank you all for listening to Making Atlanta. Bryan, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thank you. Macon's in Atlanta, I guess.
Yeah, the Macon's in Atlanta podcast. Nice. I hope you planned that. I happen to know that you didn't run high school cross country, but did recreationally growing up. How has running evolved for you as something that's been important in your life, and what does that look like now?
So I've been running for a long time. Played sports all growing up and through high school. As you mentioned, never dabbled in track or cross country. Looking back, kind of wish that I had, but it's been kind of something that I've found a little bit later in life. And I would say that I started to really love running in around 2020. Just some life circumstances around that time. Our first son, Brooks, was born in April of 2019. And so as we were kind of just cresting the hill, as all the new parents know, kind of the first 6 months or so, your whole world gets turned upside down. So we're kind of just coming out of that. And then, all of a sudden the COVID pandemic hits. And so we're all stuck in the house, going a little stir crazy. And running just kind of took on a whole new meaning and level of importance in my life. I kind of naturally fell back into it because it was kind of the logistically simplest form of exercise that I could do, just waking up in the morning early before the rest of the house was up and needed me. And then, obviously being limited on the activities that we could even do during COVID. So it was a way to get outside, be in nature, just have some time to myself, kind of the moving meditation. And it's just kind of evolved from there. So, like I mentioned, so I started kind of getting into it more seriously in 2020, kind of gradually, sort of ramped up, the distances that I was doing and things like that. And then, decided in 2021, to try and, run a marathon. So, I ran my first marathon back in 2015 at the St. Jude's, in Memphis, Tennessee. So one of my best friends was in med school at the time at University of Tennessee, which is in Memphis. And that was actually my first exposure to the concept of fundraising too. So I decided to raise money for St. Jude's Children's Hospital for that race, and just the experience of, kind of going through that. And then, one of the really cool parts about that race course is you actually run through the St. Jude's Hospital campus, and all the kids and their families are lining both sides of the street cheering for you. And I don't think any of the runners has a dry eye by the time you make it out of that tunnel and that portion of the course. But then I kind of took a little break from it. So 2021 decided to get back into it, run another marathon. And I had picked one in Savannah, Georgia, and it was in the fall of 2021. And Brent and his family joined us. We all got a place over at the beach for the weekend, and we're going to run the race. And that weekend, one of the worst storms in the last decade or so rolls through Savannah. And morning of the race, we find out that they decided to cancel the marathon. So canceled the marathon, but still decided that they were going to hold the half, which was an interesting decision. So Brent and I, we braved the elements. It was really cold, driving rain that day, just pretty brutal. I have this vivid memory of huddling with you in a porta potty before the race.
Not the same porta potty, for the record.
No.
It was so bad. I'll just interject. It was like high 30s and driving winds and rain. And I think they canceled the marathon because there weren't enough people to volunteer it, right?
Yeah,
They couldn't secure the roads. And so they had, this whole big corridor set up for people to start, but then not that many people came out for the race. And so we were like, all right, well, we're here before the race, but it's freezing. Where do we stand? We were like, let's just go to a porta potty for warmth. And then I don't know about you, but since then, any time that it's been bad weather or I've been tired or any run that I haven't wanted to do, I've been like, well, I can't be worse than Savannah.
Yeah, no, totally. So pivoted after Savannah. I was already kind of trained up, but had the minor life circumstances having our second child in December of that year. And so the Publix Atlanta Marathon that Brent referred to is in February. So was somehow able to convince my wife to let me run that one. So continued to train, did Publix in 2022, and fortunately was able to qualify for the Boston Marathon. So went up to Boston in 2023 and did that race. And that was just such a cool experience. Like it really, as a running nerd, it really feels kind of like the Super Bowl of running up there. Just the whole city comes out for it. Just such a cool experience on Patriot Day. It's a citywide holiday. It was awesome. And so just super excited, kind of looking ahead to the next thing, kind of planning ahead with Brent. And we had always kind of circled New York as a bucket list item. One of the most iconic races, I would say, of all the marathons in the country, and the opportunity to do it together with you, and then also in support of, Back My Feet, which has meant so much to us, is really special.
Mm. So we're gonna come back to the marathons and New York Marathon specifically towards the end here. Before we get to Back on My Feet, curious on a little bit more of the why of running and what it does for you, what it gives for you, and also how you decide how much of yourself to give to it. And, I referenced earlier you waking up early to make these runs happen. What is it about the marathon distance and that challenge that makes it worth getting up at 5 or before 5 to get these runs in before work? Like, how does it fuel you?
Yeah. So I think a couple things. One, it really feels like, sort of a foundational habit in that, going for the runs in the morning, it just cascades into, many other parts of my life and into my day. So, if you're getting up early to run, you're probably trying to make as many other sort of healthy decisions around that to enable you to do that. So you're trying to make sure that you go to bed at a decent hour to get enough sleep, and you're probably not having, that last drink before bed, sure. Just to make sure that you feel good when you wake up. Like the more you do it, like you want to feel good when you're training. And so, I think it has so many, healthy ripple effects in my life, that enable me to be, show up and be my best self. And then I think just the general philosophy of trying to, seek opportunities to do hard things consistently in life, I think is just so important. And, I just have the thought all the time, like, if you wake up early and you've done an hour of hill repeats, or, you've gone out for a run in a rainstorm, like there's really not much else that can happen during your day that's going to be harder than that. Like you've kind of already made that choice intentionally, to go do something hard. And it's good for, trains your mind just as much as it trains your body.
And speaking of getting up early, when did you start with Back on My Feet, and how did you hear about it?
Yeah. So, I first heard of Back on My Feet, through a coworker. So I was working for a company called Triage Consulting Group, in Midtown Atlanta. and I'd started in 2014. And one of my coworkers at the time, a guy named John Childress, found out he was a fellow UNC alum, so we were already kind of hitting it off. And once he found out that I like to run, he told me about this charity organization that he was involved with as a volunteer called Back on My Feet. And when a lot of people's first reaction when he described it to me is as a running program where you go to a local homeless shelter and meet up with folks early in the morning to go out for group runs. It's kind of one of those things that you sort of have to see to believe. So there's one of the teams in Atlanta based out of the Salvation Army is about 3 miles away from our office at the time. And so he and I would park at the office. We'd jog down to the Salvation Army and just started kind of going down there with him and saw what Back on My Feet was all about, got exposed to the program. And so just kind of started doing that consistently with him. And it's amazing how quickly you get sort of integrated into the community. It's such a welcoming group of people, a tremendous group of volunteers, many of which, the same folks that I met back in 2014 are still actively involved today, and have developed some really deep relationships with those people in that community that's endured. And it's been awesome. Like I've tried to pay it forward and share Back on My Feet with other people in my life as well. So I've recruited some other volunteers to come out and obviously, something that you and I have done together over the last few years, and it's just been really meaningful.
Yeah. Can you explain like what it is, how the program works?
Yeah, absolutely. So Back on My Feet, it's a national organization. So they're in most major cities around the country, and they partner with local homeless shelters in the area. And it's a multi-step program. So there are group runs 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then kind of an all-team meetup run on Saturdays. And they start at 5:45 in the morning. So that's a key component of it is building that routine and that habit of getting up early, getting your exercise in and kind of having that start to your day. And so it's a run walk program. Starting out, and then once folks maintain a certain level of participation in the run walks, then they qualify for additional services such as job skills training and eventual housing placement. And Back on My Feet has tremendous resources in terms of programmatic support. They are checking in on all the members constantly. They're available. They're providing counseling and training, all the time. Working through those partners at the shelters, and so it's just really cool to see. You see all across the spectrum of folks. Some you may only see once or twice at a run, and then they just decide that it isn't for them, or the flip side is, the best possible outcome is, they may get a job and they can no longer come out at 5:45 because they've got to get to work. And then, there's folks that, you see kind of move all the way through the program and come out on the other side. And it just seeing that transformational impact, and, guys that continue to come out and support, new members and recruit guys and evangelize the program. It's just such a powerful thing to see.
Yeah. So it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 5:45 a.m. runs, try to do 2 or 3 miles. And then through that, folks are building community and consistency, discipline, often physical strength. Folks are oftentimes experiencing addiction or recovery, or coming back from being formerly incarcerated. And this is their first kind of re-exposure to an exercise program and moving around. And so they're doing that with a mix of other people who are in the shelter. So we do it out of Salvation Army and with a group of volunteers who comes out and literally walks and runs and just is with those folks as they're progressing on their journey. Bryan's been doing this now. How long are we? Over 10 years?
Yeah, coming up on 10 years. I couldn't tell you the exact date when I started, but yeah, it was 2014, so 10 years.
Yeah, and trying to get trying to get me out for a long time. And there were
Yeah.
a number of years where I was traveling for consulting Monday to Thursday. And I was like, oh, dude, I just don't know if the Friday morning 5:45 runs are going to be there. But I went to a couple galas with you and a breakfasts, and you hear people talk about the impact both on the members, so folks who have gone through the program and been the runners and the participants, and on the volunteer side and the community that they're building. And it's undeniable. And so you mentioned that 2020 tipping point. Like, I stopped traveling for work, started to be home a lot more, started to come out with you, and then have been trying to do it for a few years, and has really become kind of a core staple, I think, of what we do in the community, which is special. Curious, what are some of the big things that you have learned or noticed or taken away from some of that experience of walking and running alongside the members?
Yeah. So I'd say, I mean, one of my favorite things about volunteering with Back of My Feet is the impact is just so real and so personal. And I'm kind of a quiet person, and it's always really interesting. Like there's certainly a level of discomfort that happens naturally, right? I mean, it's like you're getting up early, you meet someone for the first time. And there's sort of that feeling out period of trying to find some common interests. You're just kind of, exploring, conversation and trying to find some of that commonality. And, it's amazing, like how quickly you can get to some of that sort of shared humanity. And you realize that, someone that you perceive to be so different from you in some ways is really not, right? I mean, we're all people at the end of the day. We want to be understood, loved, accepted, valued, and we're working towards some of those same things. And I mentioned the impact, and it's just truly incredible. Like a couple, things that people have, members have mentioned to me over the years volunteering, things like, I believe that God has put you in my life for a reason to help me, take this next step and get back on a road of recovery and being healthy. And, things like, this is one of the first times in my life that I felt like a white person truly cared about me. I mean, just really powerful, amazing things. And I don't say that to present myself as some like amazing humanitarian. Like, it's almost the opposite. Like, all I'm doing is showing up and listening and being present and supporting someone, along their journey. And the fact that is the impact that type of activity can have, is truly incredible. And, you think about that in other parts of your life as well, and how powerful that can be. And it's really amazing.
I feel that so much. A lot of times you are literally just walking alongside someone, and that is checking the box, and it's all you have to do and all you're supposed to do and the best that you can do.
Yeah.
And I, in life, am kind of uncomfortable with silence and always trying to make conversation. And there are times where it's like, all right, this person might be 25 years older than me, recovering from addiction. They might have been formerly in the service. We might look very different and have drastically different lived experiences. Like, what are we going to talk about? And there are some days where I'll ask, like, where you're from, what's your family like? Tell me your story. And we'll talk for 45 minutes. And there's others where it's like very clear that someone's on their own walk and they just want us to be with them. And that there's not going to be some great illustrative conversation to have. And so it's like releasing, to your point, it's like, it's not about us being humanitarians, just like, what does this situation call for? What does this person want on their journey, and how we can support them? Like, it lowers the bar of what you have to do. It's not performative. It's nothing like that. It really just feels like people going out for a walk or a run together.
Totally.
Any specific people that stick out? And I've got a couple that I would love to mention. But any either specific stories or specific people that have had a memorable walk and a memorable journey with you?
Yeah. I mean, I'll go back to, there's a couple guys, that I've literally known since the first days that I started volunteering with the Salvation Army team back in 2014. And these are members who started by going through the Back of My Feet program, and they're still involved today. So guys like Eli Hamner, Jason Robinson, I remember Jason, like he worked as he was kind of getting a job and, starting to find his work again. When he was living at Salvation Army, he worked the night shift, and he would still come out and walk and run with us in the mornings, and then go, sleep most of the day, deservedly. I just remember being just so blown away that somebody would make that type of commitment. And he still comes out and supports, he comes to the group runs. He shows up to those runs on Monday, Wednesday, Friday to, support the members who are going through, this journey now in their lives. And I remember something that Eli told me one time when I was, having that conversation with him, telling him like how cool I thought it was that he continues to come out and support people. And he said, you got to remember that for a lot of folks, that have come through the Back of My Feet program, even if it's made, a tremendously positive difference in their lives, like when they think and reflect back on that, it still represents a time in their life that was really challenging, and they may not be proud of and don't want to kind of think about on a regular basis, which, is totally fair. And just the fact that there's guys like him and Jason who, in spite of all that, continue to come out and support and pay it forward, is just, really powerful to see.
One of the consistent learnings that I've had, and I'm curious about some of yours too, is just how similar we are to people that we would have a story that they're very different than us. But then also just how drastically different and more challenging some of the life circumstances have been for certain people. And I'm thinking of Lonnie, who we were running with, great athlete, tall, probably 6'5", played AAU basketball growing up, as we both did. And like $1 million smile, super charismatic, funny. And I'm like, immediately like just kind of drawn to him. And we would have some great conversations about basketball and growing up. And I'm like, man, this guy's like just like me. And then, we're talking, and when did you get to Atlanta? And he had grown up in Macon, and then he came to Atlanta when he was 12, because his foster mother was sexually abusing him. It's like, we had just been talking about at what age he could dunk.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's like, record scratch. And it's, we're running, and I'm trying to think of how to respond to that. And then you realize like, man, like these guys have overcome so much.
Yeah.
And we like to give ourselves credit for doing hard things, like getting up and running hill repeats. And I'm the exact same way. And it just is a reminder that like we're playing the game on easy mode relative to a lot of people who have been dispossessed by the American capitalist system in some way or another. And that's been a huge reminder to me. Totally. Just to remember relative privilege and to have empathy for the circumstances that other folks are going through. And still like celebrating the fact that they want to get out there and run, and they want the same exact things that we want too.
Yeah.
What are some of those kind of main foundational conceptual learnings that you've had from this?
Yeah. And it's such a good story about Lonnie. And I think about it, one of the guys that came through the program named Scott, that we, he was a really consistent, participant. So we got to know him over a period of weeks and months. And he was in the military. He was a Marine. And so, had so many stories and, interesting things to say about, his experience traveling all over the world. And I remember one time talking to him about, what motivated him to join the service in the first place. And he told me about, his backstory and growing up in Florida. Both of his parents were addicted to drugs. And so, he found himself, kind of on his own a lot of the time to kind of entertain himself and do as he would. And he said that one of his favorite places to play was in the sewer system in the town where he lived, because you could get down there and just explore and adventure as a little kid. And he said that he found and got to know groups of veterans who were living on the streets, but had kind of bonded together in some shared communities. And those guys kind of became his adopted family and adopted parents. And he said that, you know, they were the ones that kept him accountable and made him go to elementary school and you know, just kind of kept him on the right path. And so, you know, they were the reason that he decided that he wanted to join the military, is just because of the influence they had had on his life. And just found that to be just such a profound story. And to your point, like such a different lived experience, and learning about the journeys that some of the folks have been on. So yeah, I think, you know, you asked about sort of foundational learnings. It's really just, you know, being more aware and gaining that perspective on other folks. And just, you know, when you meet someone, you don't know what they're going through. You don't know what their backstory is, and just trying to be, you know, sensitive to that and compassionate to that as much as you can be.
Yeah. Another big takeaway for me is like, I think we tend to have a story, or I tended to have a story, I won't speak for everybody, about like who a person experiencing homelessness is, and like life choices that they've made over time. But I think a lot of what I've learned is it can just be one circumstance or 1 month where someone is gainfully employed, a relatively, you know, an upstanding citizen, checking all the life boxes, if you will. And then something can happen with injury or illness, or their tools get stolen, or they fall behind on a rent payment. And all of a sudden it is just, oh, I'm 1 month behind, and then I'm evicted, and then I don't have anywhere to go. And if I lose a job, like, and it just compounds so quickly for folks that it really can happen in insidious and fast ways. And then the other big takeaway married with that for me is that substance addiction, especially alcoholism, is just such a compounding factor.
Yeah.
And I think of all of the things about, you know, if you wave a magic wand about our society, there's a lot of things that you might want to fix, but like the ways that alcohol preys on folks tends to kind of get a pass in how we look at things.
Yeah.
And, you know, I remember Steve, who was former military, came out of the service with a drinking habit, as so many folks do. And Steve was he was the drum major, and would always like pretend like he was playing the trombone and kick for us. And he was really trying to stop drinking. And I remember he was telling me once when we were walking, he was like, man, you know what I love to do? I love to watch football, and I love to play pool. But you know what I'm trying not to do? Drink Bud Light. It's like, and you can't play pool or watch football without Bud Light being everywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, it's like that, just that micro challenge around how do you get back on your feet while you're trying to get over something like a booze habit, when it's just thrust upon you at every step in society.
Yeah.
And that's the other big takeaway for me about the role of an organization like Back on My Feet is it's like positive inertia, positive momentum in someone's life. Because if the culture around us and anyone is suggesting that you do a thing that you know is not good for you, like it's hard to break out of that. And so if all of Steve's influences are saying like, hey, come to this bar, let's go play pool, let's drink a Bud Light, and he's got over and over and over say no by himself, that's tough. But if he's got 6 other guys that he's living with, plus this group of volunteers who's saying, Steve, be there tomorrow, 5:45 Wednesday. I'm going to be there on Friday. Like, I'm with you. Let's do this. You can do it. Make it today 60, make it today 90. Like, it can become such a positive habit momentum builder. And that has cascaded through my life too, where I know it's like the people that I'm around and the habits that they're on, I am bettered or made worse by those same habits, and they're gonna rub off on me.
Yeah.
I don't think we're sitting here, I know we're not sitting here having this conversation about running marathons and waking up super early if you, one of the biggest influences in my life, aren't doing those things. And if instead you're asking me to like, hey, can we get to Johnny's on Thursday night? Like, but that's not the conversation. So I know that was a winding takeaway, but like the fact that folks who are experiencing homelessness are often just like you and me until something goes a little bit wrong. It's often compounded by alcohol or drug challenge, which the culture can make a lot worse, and that it takes people around us to help set us and keep us on a trajectory, regardless of whether it's a good or a trajectory that doesn't serve us. And like, we really got to craft go in the right place together. I think those are the things that really stand out to me.
Yeah. And I think, one of my favorite concepts from James Clear and Atomic Habits is the concept of time as a compounding factor. And like you said, I mean, it's like if you can set yourself on a good trajectory, kind of that gradual upward trajectory, and then let time play out. Like, you're going to get healthier, you're going to get stronger, you're going to, all those other positive outcomes that come with this is, almost inevitable if you set it in the right direction. And, it's funny you mentioned it. I think one of the things that I enjoy seeing the most is like a lot of folks, when they first start coming out, you see some guys who are smoking cigarettes, like even like right before we start running, and gradually, like, you see them come out for a few times, and then gradually they just kind of stop. And it's because, like, you're now all of a sudden you're exercising, you're running, and it's like you feel terrible if you smoke a cigarette and try and run. Not that I've ever tried it, but it sounds horrible. And just watching like that natural progression of folks building those healthier habits and the way that it kind of rubs off is awesome.
What about the flip side of the healthy habits rubbing off? Like, obviously you've been doing this for 10 plus years. What about when you see somebody fall back? And I think of one circumstance where a guy we'd been running with for a while felt like he was making super positive momentum, and then wasn't there one day. And I had heard that he had gotten really banged up on that Friday night, and then gotten in a fight with a few guys at the shelter and was kicked out of the program for some period of time. And it was like, oh,
yeah,
man, like I felt so sorry and sad, and just cocktail of negative emotions. Have you seen that happen, and what does that feel like? And how do you, how do you stay positive engaged when that happens?
Yeah, it's always really tough. And, I'm sure, folks that work in social work and have more experience in that realm, see this constantly. But yeah, it's always hard when you see someone, especially if they seem like they're starting to make positive steps in the right direction. And then, like you said, something happens and they get knocked back. But I think it's inevitable. It's part of life, and you can't, folks are just going to have those struggles, and the program's not going to work 100% of the time for everybody. But I think the important thing is, just continuing to show up. And it's like, the cool thing about Back My Feet is that it's always there, right? Like, as soon as you're ready to come back out, it's like that same group of people is going to be out there the next Wednesday or the next Friday and ready to welcome you right back in. And we've seen that happen. There's people that you see and then they come back, and, everybody's journey is different. And I think that's just such an important thing about the program, is just continuing to be there and, wherever, meet people where they are and ready to receive them when they're ready to come back.
Claudio Bauza, who is a long-time volunteer and super inspiring guy, wise, he said, it's a spiral, but it's an upward spiral.
Yeah.
And everybody's on their
analogy.
journey. And we just try to meet them where they are on their journey. And when they're ready for us, we're ready for them. And often they come back. Sometimes they don't. But that was helpful perspective there. Let's shift gears and talk about marathon running and your marathon, and we'll go through some of the past ones and then get to New York. The Atlanta Marathon, I know you had a goal time that you were 3 seconds off from your goal time, but still qualified for Boston.
Thanks for the reminder.
You've since vanquished that, so it's okay. What was that like? And how did it fuel you? How didn't it fuel you? How much mind share did you let that take up or not? Like, how did you rationalize going through that much of a training program, then having an 8-week-old and then running a fantastic time, but being 3 seconds off your goal time?
Yeah. It was a great ego check. One of those steps along the journey that was, difficult at the time, but was a great learning experience, I think. So as I mentioned, I ran my first marathon in 2015, took a few years off. And then by the time that Publix marathon rolled around in 2022, I was in pretty good shape. Cause like I said, we'd trained for the Savannah marathon that didn't work out. And so I just really had a couple additional months to sort of stack on top of that base that I'd built. And so I really wanted to shoot for, the 3 hour time in the marathon is like an aspirational goal for a lot of folks. Like you can break 3 hours. It's a big deal, or at least I had told myself it was a big deal. And so that was my goal heading into the Publix. And tough weather day. It was
also raining.
Yep. Also raining. It's a consistent theme, it seems like. And so I remember, I was out there and like a lot of marathons, there's a split at the halfway point where it's like half marathon, take a left, the finish line's right here. Like full marathon, go right. You got a long way to go.
Yeah.
And it was like everybody that I was around at the time was doing the half. And so they stop and I keep going and it's cold and it's raining and I was basically by myself.
Yeah. People are like on that last, like you come down Marietta Street in the Publix marathon and people are like, almost there. We got this. Let's go. We're almost there. It's like, dude, I have 14 more miles.
So yeah, I run through the back half of that course. It is tough. Some really cool spots. You run through some of the college campuses, like Spelman, and there's awesome cheer sections. You run by the zoo in Grant Park, which is cool. And so I'm kind of checking my watch. Like, I think like, yeah, I'm right on pace. I'm going to do it. I'm feeling good. And like a lot of races, like just by the way that, you kind of run the course and take the turns and all that, like the distance ends up being a little bit longer than what you think it's going to be. And so even though like on my pace, I thought I was right on track. I get to the end, I'm sprinting to the finish. I think I'm good. And I look down at my watch and I had run 3 hours and 3 seconds. And so on one hand, I'm so pumped. Like, I mean, it was, objectively like just such an awesome race. And like, I felt like I'd performed really well, but at the same time, like just, in a race that long, and to miss it by such a small margin, was tough to swallow. But luckily I had just turned 35. So I kind of hit the next, qualifying age bracket for Boston. So thankfully that 3 hours was still good enough to qualify me for the race, which definitely helped kind of ease the sting a little bit there.
And let's talk about Boston. And I'm excited to tell my spectator story because that's kind of when I got the bug. But like you mentioned it being the Super Bowl of running. What was that like to run in the Super Bowl of running?
Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, that's the first, Boston's one of the 6 major marathons. So just huge events, tons of people. I think there's like 30 or 40,000 runners that run Boston from all over the world. Just truly incredible. And just the whole city, literally from the time you step off the plane is just buzzing. The whole downtown, it's like, any running related, company or, so forth that you can think of is there and represented. They have pop-up shops everywhere. There's other smaller races happening around the city that weekend. As I mentioned, they make the race day a holiday in Boston. There's an early morning Red Sox game every year on that day. And so just the crowds are just electric. And so just being in that environment was so cool and so energizing.
Yeah, we went to the Red Sox game the day before the race and they had sold out of non-alcoholic Sam Adams. I was like, it's got to be the only time it's ever happened where the non-alcoholics just immediately sold out because there were so many people getting prepared for the race. But it really, to your point, it does feel like the whole city comes out. Never seen so many fit people in an airport either. And then my experience watching, so we went on Heartbreak Hill, which everything is in proportion. And we mentioned things are always going to be easier after that Savannah run. But when you run on the Atlanta hills and then everyone tells you Boston's really hilly and it's like, Atlanta's hillier and more challenging. But there is a notorious hill, Heartbreak Hill from 18 to 20. Is that right? So like, people are 18 to 20 miles in. So people are pretty gassed. And so we got there early and we were going to watch, it was my dad and our friend Tucker Piner, who's running New York with us also. And I were going to watch Bryan come through. And so we got there early, and first you see the professional wheelchairs athletes roll through. And roll through is like not even the right word. Like those guys were flying, and they're such muscular arms going through faster on a wheelchair than you can picture that a wheelchair could go. And so that was inspiring. And then after that came the non-professional wheelchairs, which didn't expect to cry at the Boston Marathon, honestly, but watching these people struggle and work up Heartbreak Hill. And there's one guy who's a little bit overweight and he was clearly laboring. And there was a woman running through the crowd next to him, just cheering him on. And it was just like, come on, dude, like you got it. It was so awesome and inspiring. And so then you get to reset emotionally for about 15 minutes. And then the professional men came through in their 20th miles, running up the hill, running 4-minute and 40-second miles.
Wow.
And then another few minutes went by and the professional women came through, and they're obviously, shorter than the men, but it's just like, how are they going that fast? And it truly, that was the first time I'd seen professional runners, especially the elite ones, up close and personal. And it's like watching poetry in motion, where this form, like the human form, perfected for running. And it was beautiful. And it just made it look so hard and easy at the same time.
Yeah.
And then to watch everyone else roll through. Another, big takeaway for me, like I said, Bryan finished 17th in the Atlanta Marathon. He's like practically running by himself. And not to throw any shade, but I think you were 2,800th, give or take, in the Boston Marathon. And so it's like, there's so many people out there who can cook and who can run, and they all don't look like you, like tall, lanky, running prototype. Like they're all sorts of body types and otherwise. And so it just felt like this really amazing celebration of physicality and health and mobility, and everybody being able to run their race regardless of what they looked like or where they were from. International melting pot. And then you finished the race, and we met up with your family afterwards, got to celebrate with your kids, got to start eating the first of many meals. I hadn't done anything. I was just watching. And then we walked back by, and then at this point, it's people who had started later because they had raised money for charity. Oftentimes they're running their first race, and you kind of turn onto Boylston Street, and it's like people who like turn, they're like just throwing their hands up. They're hugging family members on the way to the finish line, and just this like festival celebration day. It was a all-time vibes factory. It was great.
It was like, I mean, as awesome as my own personal experience running was, like, I remember that part of the day probably the most out of anything. It's just like when we went back and watched, all those other folks finishing up. Like Boston has this kind of iconic finish that all the running nerds out there know. It's like, it's right onto Hereford Street, left onto Boylston. And so like we were right there at that corner where people were making that left from Hereford onto Boylston into that kind of final straightaway. And yeah, exactly like you said, just the joy and like the celebration of everyone. And it's not just regardless of where you finish. I mean, at the front or, everyone all the way to the back of the pack, like everyone's having that same experience. And that was just like, that was so incredible to watch. I don't know how long we stood there, but that was so cool.
Yeah. What are you looking forward to about New York?
Oh man. So I, I've already listened to my first of what will probably be many New York preview podcasts.
Nerd.
Yeah, totally. I'll own that. And just like, I mean, from descriptions of friends who have run the race and stories that I've heard, like I'm just so excited. Like, I think it's hard to imagine a better marathon course in the world, honestly. Like getting to run through the 5 boroughs of New York, like over the bridges, up Fifth Avenue through Central Park, like iconic course. Yeah. And I'll let you tell this, but I know one of someone that you spoke to recently said it was the loudest race environment and the most energetic race environment he'd ever been in. And just like the anticipation of all that is just so exciting to me. I think it's going to be so cool.
Yeah. There's 9 of us from the Atlanta Back on My Feet community that are going up there and running it together too. And so we got a nice little squad.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, to even go back to that point on the different types of people that were running Boston, I mean, to weave this into Back on My Feet, it's like running and movement represents, I think, a great unifier that we all share, and that there are people at all stages and spectrums of a journey, whether they're walking 3 miles for the first time because they haven't been exercising in some long period of time and they're on a road to recovery, or whether they're trying to run a personal best in a marathon. But it's here for all of us. And so I do think that there's something around, the 9 people coming to do it from Back on My Feet, representing all of the Back on My Feet community and what we do here in Atlanta, and then bringing that to New York when there's going to be millions of spectators and tens of thousands of people running it. I'm just excited about kind of that unifying hive feeling of all being out there and doing it together. So very excited for that.
Totally.
Tying it back into Back on My Feet, if someone are listening to this and they're thinking about trying Back on My Feet for the first time and coming out there and running, what would you say to somebody?
Yeah. So, part of what we're doing by recording this podcast is we want to promote, we're fundraising for Back on My Feet. And, as impactful and meaningful as all of those, in-person kind of personal experiences are that we've had volunteering, like obviously, the program wouldn't be able to run and function without monetary support as well. But I think, there's so many great events out there and opportunities to raise funds. But I think, like we've said, the true power of the program, like you really have to kind of come out there and see it and experience it. And so one thing I'll say is it's really accessible, right? I mean, if you can, just kind of get over that mental hurdle of, man, I got to wake up early and go out there and do this. And it may be a little bit uncomfortable at first. It's very easy to get connected. Obviously if you're in the Atlanta area, you can hit either of us up and we'd be happy to get you connected or invite you out, meet up with you if you want to come out for a run in the morning.
There also, I will say, there's a Saturday run that meets up at a less challenging hour. It's either 7:30,
I think. Yeah.
And so that's accessible, and they have some different distances. So if you're hearing this and you're like, "Ooh, I don't know about 5:45," but you would come to 7:30 on Saturday, hit us up. Let's do one of those together too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But don't take the easy way. Come to the early one. I'm backtracking on that.
But yeah, no matter what city you're in, it's very, if you go to the Back of My Feet website, you can get connected if you want to volunteer. And, like I said, such a welcoming community. You won't have any trouble getting plugged in.
Let's talk about the fundraising. So we got a fundraising goal we're trying to hit for New York. And then, I appreciated learning this, just like what do some of those fundraising tier milestones unlock?
Yeah. So, some of the milestones, and just to give you a sense of the impact, if you're considering donating, that those funds could have. So $50 can help a member or an alum secure an interview and or begin a new job position. $100 provides public transportation card to ensure safe and reliable transportation to or from work. $250 provides a member with basic furnishings for a new home. And $1,000 can cover most professional certifications, so members can find work. And so I know, anecdotally from guys that we've met, a lot of guys are pursuing CDL certifications, so they can drive, or HVAC certifications, things like that, in the professions. And so just to give you a sense of kind of where those dollars can go.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, again, to like kind of reiterate the progression, it's like folks come out, they run, they demonstrate consistency, they're building discipline over time. They're getting shoes, they're getting some back on my feet gear, they're getting support with starting to move into their own place, to go to job interviews, to get job training, to get outfitted for those job interviews. And then, like Bryan said, like one of the coolest days, a guy that we'd been running with for a long time came back in his service truck because he was a technician working on HVAC and electric and plumbing, and like he was in his uniform and in his truck, and it was just like, that's awesome. And he did kind of our opening circle. And so that financial support supports obviously the administration. So like Heather and Doug do an awesome job in Atlanta keeping the program running, but then also most importantly, like helping those men and women who are making it happen and taking the steps to move to a more whole and productive version of their lives. And so it's a way to honor that journey and to participate, whether you participate as a runner and or in financing. And so if you're listening to this and you have the means, we'll obviously link it in this episode and appreciate the support. And then we'll hit you up on the other side. I guess we won't hit you up. We'll update you on the other side of the New York experience and let you know how the race goes. So thank you all if you're able to support.
Yeah, thank you so much. Any support, we would be so appreciative. Hopefully now giving you a glimpse of the program and the impact that you can have. We'd so much appreciate you supporting us along this journey.
And even though we did this special edition podcast, I'm still hitting the lightning round questions.
Oh, should have probably prepared for this.
Oh, is this true lightning round?
True lightning round.
All right. What's your favorite Atlanta meal?
Oh man. Well, since this is a marathon podcast, I'll go with some Italian food. So I love La Tavola in Virginia Highlands. That's one of my favorite date spots with my wife.
What do you think happens to us when we die?
I think our spirits live on somehow.
Is there a favorite book or podcast or resource that you would recommend, running related or otherwise?
Ooh, so many good ones. Yeah, I've got some very nerdy running podcasts. Which
doesn't have to be running. I can open the aperture.
I've really been enjoying making Atlanta, to be honest.
Plug for this episode you're listening to.
I've told Brent, like, obviously I would listen to these episodes because I'm your brother, but they're awesome. And I love Tim Ferriss too. So I'd always try and check his out.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate that. If I could be mentioned in the same sentence as Tim Ferriss, that would be a big win. What is a habit that you see us embracing in modern culture that you don't think serves us well? And what should we replace that with? And you can't say looking at your phone too much.
Yeah. So I'll say, I work fully remote and have since COVID. And I think just creating opportunities for more in-person connections, both personally and professionally, is so beneficial. Like for those of us that do work from home, I love some of the benefits of that, right? Like, it makes training a whole heck of a lot easier. Mm-hmm. But it's easy to, at least for me, to get sort of trapped in, not making the effort to go, reach out and have coffees and lunches with people and get out and continue to have those, opportunities for in-person interactions. And I think it's just so important and something that we should all, make sure that we continue to strive for kind of in this modern work environment that we're all in.
Yeah. Let's think about, all right, human history, we're 200,000 years old. What have we done for the first 199, 900 that we do differently now? And it's like being by yourself behind a computer screen all day. That's just is not how we evolved to be. And I was fully remote for a couple of years, and I would have days where I got out at the end, and it's kind of felt like in a weird time warp. And I know it really works for some people and some dispositions, but I'm with you on we need people.
Totally.
Need to be around people. And then finally, what's a hope or a vision you would have for Atlanta, whether specific or broad, that you'd hope to be true in our future?
Yeah, I think, in the context of Back on My Feet, I would just say, I hope that we continue to prioritize providing support services, for not just for folks experiencing homelessness, but, any groups within our city who are, marginalized or struggling, that, rather than trying to kind of cover up issues, that we are willing to really dig in and understand and try and come up with meaningful solutions that don't just address, the problem at hand, but some of the root causes as well. We just continue to try and do that deep work and that important work.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for spending time today. Good luck in the race. I'll be there too.
You too, man.
Good luck to us. We'll update you on the other side. Thank you to everybody who listened. That's our show today. Like we mentioned, some great ways to support Back on My Feet. You can go to backonmyfeet.org. Obviously, we'll have the link in the show notes. I'm really curious what you thought. If you want to come out at Back on My Feet, let us know. If you've got a volunteering cause that you're particularly passionate about, what is that? We'd love to hear that too. As always, thank you for journeying with us. We'll see you soon. All right.